Robert DeRista was born in 1929 in New York, studied at the Art Students League, New York University, and Columbia University, studying with Philip Guston. In 1956 and in 1957, he studied painting in Italy as a Fulbright Fellow. He came to Washington, D.C. in 1961 to teach at American University and was included in the gallery roster from 1961 to 1962. He remained at American University until 1984 when he left to join the faculty at Boston University. And Lee Newman grew up in Alexandria, Virginia, and studied with both Robert DeRista and Jack Bohl at the American University, where he earned his BFA and MFA. In 1984, he founded the Washington Studio School, where Jack Bohl also taught, before retiring to paint full-time. Newman's work are also in many private and public collections, including the Corcoran, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the National Gallery of Art, and the Library of Congress. Give it up for Lee Newman.
So thank you all for coming. I guess this is working. I thought, because after DeRista died in 87, he died at 58. And that was rather young. He died suddenly. And it was very difficult for his family, certainly, and for those of us who were his students. And so I found myself in the position of asking his wife, Jane, if she'd be willing to lend me his etching plates so that I could print editions from them. And so many of the etchings of his that are here are ones I printed and the ones that I own. And I thought it would be a fine and good thing to do this at the Delaplane to emphasize the tradition, the importance of teaching, and in the case with DeRista, the rich tradition that he inherited and that I inherited from him. And it goes way back. So here's what I planned. I'm going to, because DeRista was Italian, I thought I would go way back to the Renaissance. And I'm going to do this in two parts. And roughly, I hope the reading will be about 10 minutes, and interesting enough that it will keep you in your seats. But at that point, I will give you a little break, and then you can ask me some questions about anything, the work or whatever. And then I thought I would read from transcriptions of notes that one of his students, Anna Ochin, made in his classes. And she did a very good job of recording, aesthetic points he made. And I selected from her exhaustive number of notes, and I will then use those. I would use a few examples of the work to point out those ideas and that shouldn't take too long, 10 minutes too. And then you can move about the ship, or ask me more questions. Hey, come on in. There's seats if you want one. You could, boy, you're a work of art. Sure. All right, this book, this is a Dover publication. Those Dover publications are usually historic in nature. And this was published in 1960. It was required reading for those of us who had to take a studio course called Materials and Techniques. And it's called The Craftsman's Handbook by Cennino Cellini. And I'm not going to read that much. Well, I'm going to read a little bit from it. And I think what's interesting to note, let's see, find the first. Cennino is very proud of his heritage as I am of mine. And he starts at the beginning, the first chapter of this book, and there are many chapters. In the beginning, when Almighty God created heaven and earth, above all, animals and foods, and he created man and woman in his own image, endowing them with every virtue. That's a fairly august beginning. I'm going to skip on down into the middle of the paragraph. And so he's dealt with the expulsion from Eden. And he said, man afterward, after being you know, pushed out of Eden, pursued many useful occupations, differing from each other, and some were and are more theoretical than others. They could not all be alike, since theory is the most worthy. Close to that, man pursued some related to the one which calls for a basis of that means theory, coupled with skill of hand, and this is an occupation known as painting, which calls for imagination, skill of hand, and in order to discover things not seen, hiding themselves under the shadow of natural objects, and to fix them with a hand, presenting to plain sight what does not actually exist. And it justly deserves to be enthroned next to theory and to be crowned with poetry. So he's, he's tying, all the arts and all of the occupations, linking them. And then he says, I, Cennino, son of Andrea Cennini of Colliba d'Elsa, I was trained in this profession for 12 years by my master, Agnolo di Taddeo of Florence. He learned this profession from Taddeo, his father, and his father was christened under Giotto and was the fowler for 24 years. And that Giotto changed the profession of painting from Greek back into Latin and brought it up to date. And he had more finished craftsmanship than anyone has had since. Now, by that, Giotto in art history is often considered the father of modern painting. And there's a great example of a Madonna and Child at the National Gallery. And what he so effectively does is he takes what had been long held and established traditions in altarpiece painting, and he infused the one at the National Gallery with a beautiful sense, a tender sense of observation, and so the baby Jesus is not just volumetric and convincing, but grabbing on the finger of Mary, his mother. So now let's see, go to the next chapter. How some enter the profession through loftiness of spirit and some for profit. I won't go through all of that. It is not without impulse, a lofty spirit that some are moved to enter this profession, attracted to them through natural enthusiasm. Their intellect will delight in drawing, provided their nature attracts them to it of themselves without any master's guidance, out of loftiness of spirit. And then, through this delight, they come to want to find a master and to bind themselves to him and with respect for authority, undergoing an apprenticeship in order to achieve perfection in all this. And then there are those who pursue it because of poverty, so they think they're going to make money. I'm not going to read the rest of that. Then another section, another chapter. Fundamental provisions for anyone who enters the profession. You, therefore, who with lofty spirit are fired with this ambition and are about to enter the profession, begin by decking yourselves with this attire: enthusiasm, reverence, obedience, and constancy. And begin to submit yourself to the direction of a master for instruction as early as you can, and do not leave that master until you have to, or until you graduate from undergraduate school. And then you come back and do it again in graduate school. Let's see, let's go to another one. So there are many little chapters in this. The chapters, there's a way to make tracing paper, how green tint is made on paper for drawing, and the way to temper it. And he talks about practices. One reason we had to read this is because we learned how to make Italian chalk gesso panels and how to make egg tempera, just as he lays out in this book. How beyond masters you should constantly copy from nature with steady practice. So one hallmark of Renaissance Italian painting was there are three aspects of art, and Leonardo exemplifies them to a T. Study great art of the past, study from nature, and then practice. And then this section is about living life, how you should regulate your life in the interests of decorum and the condition of your hand, and in what company and what method you should first adopt for copying a figure from high up. We won't get that far, but your life should always be arranged just as if you were studying theology or philosophy or other theories. That is to say, eating and drinking moderately, at least twice a day, electing digestible and wholesome dishes and light wines, saving and sparing your hand, preserving it from such strains as heating stones, crowbar, and many other things that are bad for your hand, from giving them a chance to weary it. There's another cause, which, if you indulge it, can make your hand so unsteady that it will waver more and flutter far more than leaves do in the wind, and this is indulging too much in the company of women. I didn't avoid that. Let's see. Well, how you should first start drawing on paper with charcoal, and he does talk about how to make charcoal as well from vines, which we did. Willow vine. It's fun to make your own stuff because it's free. I'm going to skip that. Oh, how to make brushes, and that's actually useful to know, but I wouldn't recommend it. And he talks about the different types of brushes, hog bristle, but Minerva brushes are red squirrel hair. Brushes generally in that period, were the round type that we have. It wasn't until, say, the Impressionist period that hog bristle brushes, the brights, the sort of shovel-like brushes became possible because you could shovel a lot of paint out onto the canvas. Let's do this. Hey. Okay, there are different types of size or glue. Fish glue is used in how it is tempered. It's made from various kinds of fish, and it probably doesn't smell well. And then goat glue or rabbit skin glue, which I still make today. How goat glue is made and how it is tempered and how many purposes it will serve, and it does. And there's a glue known as leaf glue made out of clippings of goats' muzzles, feet, sinews, and many clippings of skins. This glue is made in March or January. That's when the goats and sheep are slaughtered. During strong frost and winds, it is boiled with clear water until it is reduced to less than half. Then it's put into flat dishes, like jelly molds or basins, straining it thoroughly, and then let it stand overnight. Then in the morning, it forms a sheet. It's cut with a knife into slices like bread and put on a mat to dry in the wind out of sunlight. An ideal glue will result. This glue is used by painters, saddlers. It's also used by furniture makers too. And I'll just leave it at that. It is, I still have, now it's sold in a very powdered form, so it dissolves easily. But I have the form that is, it's a sheet, and you have to break it up. And basically it's Knox gelatin. It's what we know as Jello. Let's see. And this is making gesso panels. Am I missing good things? There are different types of ways of making gesso. And gesso is basically the glue mixed with a filler or sort of something like plaster, and then pigment, which would in that case have been, they used lead pigment then, and preferred that because it was very stable. And anybody who's gone to art school probably had to make gesso panels. And gesso panels, it's not just a matter of putting, there's acrylic gesso which dries rather quickly, but chalk gesso does too. But you have to coat both sides of the panel, and you have to make it just right to the texture of heavy cream, and you have to have sanded the panel so it takes the gesso well. There can't be any fingerprints on it or it won't adhere. And you brush in one direction, wait for that to set up for a moment or so, and then brush across that, and you brush as many as at least 15 coats. And so that builds a nice chalk layer. Then, and and he becomes the, now it's not ready yet. Then you have to scrape it down or sand it. How to scrape down the gesso? You to let it dry, take a rag and some ground up charcoal in a little ball and dust it over the panel and corner. And then with a brush of hen and goose feathers, sweep and spread out this black powder over the gesso. This is because the flat cannot be scraped down too perfectly. You have to do it really well. So the black allows you to see if there's any black in the recesses. You haven't sanded, smoothed it enough. And this does take a long time. Fortunately, we have in our different grades of sandpaper going. You start with coarse and go to fine, and at the end you take a linen rag that's slightly moistened, and you buff and buff and buff, and it becomes so smooth, and until it feels like a baby's bottom. And I know what that feels like very much. And it is just beautiful. You don't even want to paint on it at that point. Yeah, just look at it and say, oh, that's great. But it is a beautiful surface and accommodates all sorts of media. Egg tempera, encaustic, oil paint if you put a sealant, imprimatura on it. So all of this I had to learn. And it took a long time. I mean, we were not only reading this book and doing, going through these procedures in class, but we were quizzed on this stuff too. Let's see. How to, and then it talks about making various, how to gild a panel, putting gold leaf on a panel. Typically in a commission altarpiece, the panel a design would be made and approved, and then the scale of the panel would be made, and often it involved putting a number of pieces of wood together, and then a structure behind that was flexible, so the pieces of wood wouldn't crack. It would expand and contract. And so after the gesso was scraped and prepared, then the gold leaf would be laid down on the panel. That's before a drawing would be transferred and the painting begun. Okay, I'm going to skip right towards the back of the book. He gives you, I mean, this is great. It's better than Joy of Cooking. Here's a section dealing with work on cloth first, and then painting and gilding, and then how to draw for embroiderers, various ways to do hangings, how to work on silk on both sides. So we've got a couple paintings that are on silk panel here in this shelf. How to gild on velvet. I think that's been done, right? And then in this section, he really gets to it's appropriate, it's almost towards the end of the book. How to do caskets or chests. So and because caskets were often decorated too, remember, especially from the beautiful Egyptian sarcophagi had paintings on them. So I thought that death is an appropriate place to stop for now. So what I thought we would do, if you've been in your seats long enough, you might want to move about and see other exhibits. But then after that, I'll read some of the notes on Darista's work from his lectures. Or if you have any comments or questions about this, you want to know where to get the book, I might have gotten it Wonder Books. You can get it online. In case you wanted to try these things. Oh, so we're ready to move on. Yeah, okay.
So how did you choose to bring the work of Darista's together with yours for the exhibit?
Well, there are good reasons and selfish reasons. Yeah, thank you, Corey, for putting this up. You really did a great job, and Kathy helped me place things. I don't get to see work, and certainly not my own, up very often, and it's only until I have an exhibit that I see see my work, and I really try to put things together that makes an interesting show and a full meal. And I thought, because we're here at the Delaplane, and this is really important here. The Delaplane is so important to Frederick, and there's so many types of classes that go on. Now, I'll mention, the kids programs are excellent, and you've got to sign up for those as soon as that thing comes out. But jewelry, there's ceramics, okay, woodworking still. Okay, well, if people sign up, there's good. The facilities are amazing. Painting and drawing, collage, things for all ages, all levels. And that's great. It offers, a wide variety of things for different tastes. This show is more of a function of a belief system, and in order to go into the field of art as I did, I went as a undergraduate, took some time off, went back to graduate school, and asked questions after a year off, and I had matured some, and I had to work very hard in a given class like a drawing class. We drew from the model many hours, and then we had assignments that we had to do outside of class. Drawing from the skeleton, 15 to 20 hours to different parts of the skeleton, and those had to be submitted and critiqued as a group. And then, of course, even after there were classes in theory, there was art history. I think the program has changed. The written thesis, the creative thesis, and the written thesis was quite rigorous, and there was a 6-hour comprehensive examination. And you had to do all of those in order to get the master's. Well, that wasn't comfortable for everybody. And it certainly wasn't for me. I resented having to do all that stuff until I realized its utility afterwards. And in fact, I'll just say this, after I was exposed to a lot, I hadn't fully internalized it. This is, I was a child, in essence. And so I did go to, I went to Vienna on a Fulbright, and I had access to one of the greatest print, maybe the greatest, the Albertina print and drawing collection, where I was able to look at etchings by Rembrandt, drawings by Goya, and the collection of Baroque paintings, Velasquez, Bruegel, Rembrandt, Caravaggio, many greats. And those had a huge impact on me. And I had to I worked while I was there, but I still had to digest that information when I came back. And when I came back, I taught some, but I organized drawing groups in my studio so that I could pay for the model. And I drew, 15 to 20 hours a week from the model for 4 years. And at that point, I thought, I'll just use those drawings and refer to them for my work. Well, after I'd done that, I didn't really need to do that. I could imagine the model without painting the model, without her Jane Bat, in the studio, and just recreate her. I had to learn to work from memory too, effectively, and that's not always taught. The memory drawing and drawing from imagination were touched on, but they weren't part of the curriculum. That get at it?
I think so.
Okay.
Why did you choose to bring Mr. Garista's work together with your own?
Because I was assigned to him as a he was my advisor, and I didn't have a choice. I mean, he basically had said to me, the requirements at AU, it was an art school within a university, and it was, as I was saying to Corey the other day, at the time that the AU, before AU had an art department, it was like any other university or college. The liberal arts, art history. It didn't have fine arts. And that was you studied in a museum if you wanted to get a fine arts education. The Corcoran had a wonderful museum school, and the Phillips collection had one too. And the Phillips, first modern museum in the United States, had a top floor, had a small school. And there were people who came to teach there, like the abstract expressionist Jack Twerkoff, or the Karl Knaus, who was older modernist. You see his work at the Met and the Museum of Modern Art, as well as the Phillips. And so the students had access to those collections, and they emphasized something a little different from what the Corcoran had. And so that, I guess maybe the Phillips needed the room. And so C. Law Watkins proposed to American University that they have a department that coupled a fine arts degree with a liberal arts education. In fact, that was going back to an earlier tradition that I'll talk about in a moment, founded by the Karachi boys, the Karachi family, in the late Italian Renaissance. And that was where when you went to art school, you didn't just study from the cast or study, if it's a painting school, painting and drawing, so you could learn how to execute, commissioned murals by the head people. You studied mathematics. You studied anatomy. Theology. Many other disciplines. That's what I had access to at American U. I minored in philosophy, and I guess I should have taken that direction. But these disciplines, I feed on one another. I pull on them. I said to students who would complain about having to go to math class, I wish I'd known more about chemistry when I was your age, because I was teaching them etching, and I had to quiz them on basic chemistry so they wouldn't screw up the plates. So they would know how to build something correctly. And it's a slow process. It's much easier everything was paint by numbers then. You could watch TV most of the day. But yes, I thought this would make a nice correspondence. You guys haven't moved around. Okay, let me go to the second. Yeah.
Can I ask, are these your favorites or no?
That's a good question. No, all my children are my favorites. No, that's very good. I did not address that. So I picked things with Doristus Amor. I only own a few, some of his paintings. I had hoped, frankly, to borrow work for this show from people, and that was not to be. And I could have put together a very different show, borrow work of my own and work of Doristus. It would have been more of a painting show. No, I picked of my work. Yeah, that's a good. Things that are themes that I deal with, and the major themes in painting, and I've tried to address them. What one hopes to do as an artist, or I've sought to do, is not just to do one thing, and repeat it over and over, but I've never really liked still life as a student. When I had an opportunity to get into an exhibit at Franz Bader was saying, well, which one would you like to be in, a figure one or still life one? I chose still life because it made me get into that and work on deficiencies. And I learned to love painters that like Chardin, whom I haven't really looked at that much. So I picked, so there's still life, landscape, figure, groups of figure, and then so within, those are the basic groups, and there's no history painting in those. Those are the main things in figurative painting. So I pick things, themes, and that aren't necessarily appealing. And I've found in my career, some things I've sought to do. It's nice to go out in the landscape until the black flies get you. but other times I've been in situations where it's been quite uncomfortable, in an Alzheimer's unit, for example, and I've had to respond. I always take drawing material, as Ed does too. So the aging process. The painting over there, I'm going to answer a question by one of my neighbors who asked me a question about how do you decide what colors to use. And I realized, because he uses colored pencils, and I said, I told him what the Baroque primaries are, if you don't want to squeeze out that much. And I said to him, Ned, typically for me, what you learn is that there's a standard palette that's permanent. And you put out those colors on the palette. Otherwise, you get kicked out of class if you don't do it right. And so I used primaries in that painting over there, the woman in the wheelchair, and it is quite gray. However, looking at it closely, there are vestiges of the primaries you see. And those were used, typical student exercises to take the primary colors, ultramarine blue, cad red light or naphtha red light, and cad yellow light or lemon, and use those as values in painting the head. Blue, it's the darkest, blue for the darks, red for the middle values, yellow for the lights. Let that dry. And you come back the next week, and you take the same colors, add white, and mix all the flesh colors, and lay them on top of that without sacrificing that brilliant understructure. Well, there's a section in doing the frescoes where Chinino talks about in painting heads, starting with a terra verde, an earth green color, and painting under the chin or on the shadow side. And that sets off, it's like prosciutto and melon. It contrasts with the flesh colors. Because I could merge the colors together, I could really restrain the palette, and I thought that resolution was the right expression for what I wanted. To have a chartreuse in there or Lily Pulitzer pink, I don't think that would have worked. While I'm thinking about it, I do have a thing that I guess it's a favorite, but I put it in because it's Black History Month. The print behind me of the African American, that's Janet Denegal, who posed for me for at least 4 years. I had mostly their drawings, but I really liked that. It took me 2 tries to get that portrait, and I've had that hanging where I paint because I like looking at it and say, why don't you, see if you can rise up to that level. I felt, and she was a veteran who was homeless. And so gave her some dignity. Let's see what else. Okay, those, let's go to the tourists.
Well, there's another question here.
I mean, it might be too much time and out of
No.
focus, but I was wondering, as an adult learner, going back to drawing, in your pedagogy, how do you, because the advantage obviously that we did study the mathematics, the anatomy, and whatever with respect to the child or the student learning. But the disadvantage is that we did study the anatomy and the mathematics, etc. So we got all this salami in front of our eyes.
Yeah.
And I'm taking a class here and I'm really struggling. So do you have in your pedagogy some pearls?
I've taught all different ages, and I really spent a lot. I liked, one of my first teaching experiences was when I was a grad student. I was given, American U had these adult ed classes, and I was in my 20s. I had students who were older than I was, and I had a fellow who was 86, and he was a retired philosophy professor, and so I had them paint self-portrait, show them how to set up the mirrors and look in them before they, so they could look in the mirror and look at their canvas without moving their damn heads. Looking is really critical. I said, don't touch the canvas until you can coordinate that. Do not do that. Now, find the nose. Okay, find it where it is in your canvas. Find each, where the ears are. So, let's not take the main measurements. So I guided them through that. It's like being a driving instructor. But he did a marvelous job because he was just looking and seeing. And I was floored. And I said to him, I ought to be sitting at your feet and listening to what you have to say. I think it's difficult. There's a distinction between looking and seeing. And it's a practice. I do link this. I grew up in an Episcopal background, so I have a Christian background. So I think it's a belief system, and that's why I think what I wanted to do was establish in my work a worldview. But with learning to draw, you sometimes have to just let go, and you have to practice a lot of exercises. There's one that's quite uncomfortable that I make students do, and it's called blind contour. And it's where you do not look at the page, and you just try to imagine that your chalk or pencil is on an edge, and that you're moving like an ant across something. And I imagine everybody who teaches here knows that. And they're, you just do this over and over and over again. It takes a few years to learn the basics, but then you can build on it. I had to. Let's go to this. I'm answering the questions, I thought, earlier than I anticipated. So these notes are from lectures that one of my friends and colleagues, Anna Ochin, transcribed. And these are from his studio classes. The idea of transformation is central in Western literature and thought. It is important in our perception of the universe and is a central idea in art. In pointillism and certain impressionist paintings, the transformation is that the eye perceives little dots or patches of color at one distance, and space, light, color, plane, the landscape at another distance. This transformation is at the heart of the artistic process and the quality of the painting. So, he's referring to, it's called hierarchical perception. And there are lots of ways of artists have known this. I mean, this goes back to the mosaics of Ravenna, when those little bits of glass and so on, or tile, came together to represent beautiful faces and so on. And it's very effective because it does have a lot to do with how we see, how we perceive, but it's we participate in that experience, which makes it all the more interesting. This painting and becoming and changing gives the painting its vitality and life. You can't achieve it by painting sketch-like. This has nothing to do with it. When we speak of the energy of painting, this is vulgar, trivialized version of a much more sophisticated idea. Energy is the life of the painting as it is becoming. A transformation from light to paint to color and back and forth. Paint a space, light, form, and color in flux, turning into something is marvelous. Then let's see. Painting is never a problem in simple rendering. There is a need for usurpation, a sense of paradox. Even if a painting depicts just a few objects, it must turn you around. You must not play fast and loose with the truth. You should search for it, but faithful rendering is not all that is involved. And then commenting on his painting, I'll use that as an example that you can't all see. But he's talking about a painting of a still life he did. Why did I paint it? That is always the question in the back of one's mind. Not just, this isn't exciting or beautiful. It is not just that. If there is a paradox, it is, what is it anyway? I've tried to describe the space, the form, the surface, and the light meticulously. I want you to believe it is real, but the mystery is, what is it? To be an artist is to be sensitive to something that urgently must be said, a poetry of objects in their evocation, something one must feel in respect to painting. Let's see. Don't have much more. The mimetic in art is very important. The ability to convey an experience which can be perceived as universal. Without art, we would feel isolated in an experience of life. Great art will express these experiences and exalt them, and will take the edge off them. Let's do this. Commissioned portraits may be skillful, but it is not a question of skill that makes them art. Victor Herbert may be as knowledgeable as Wagner or Schubert, but even Puccini is more serious. Victor Herbert proposes just excitement and delectation, the pleasure principle. It is important for artists to use the pleasure principle with great discretion, not just as an end in itself. Entertainment can't go beyond a certain point. Why is contour so effective, and this is for you, the line, so effective in the hands of a great draftsman? A line is a path. All we require of a line is that it behave correctly as a path, not simply as a limit. And this comes right out of the Da Vinci or the Florentine idea of the line as primacy versus the Venetian color. It's about color. The line as a path is the beginning of wisdom, a hand you give to the viewer. The line is a hand that guides the viewer through the drawing. The line has an imperative of its own. It is a good path or a bad path. And an example of that, there are several examples of in his work. The horizontal print there of and it's interesting because the line, it's a path. It's a path through space. It's a path across the page at the same time. It's a path. It's a barge at the C&O Canal. Managed to get you back to the lift lock or the. Another print that does that. Well, all of these. Since we were here looking. The line, it could start, it travels along this bottom part of the page. Well, it turns into the plane of the floor, and then turns vertical as maybe an easel, and then it links the model, and then out the model and into the rest of the studio interior. So, figure in space, and how does a figure occupy space? He said many times, you can paint space alone, you can paint objects in space, but you can't just make a painting out of objects alone. That comes dead. That's it. Do you have any questions? Yeah.
I notice none of your work is for sale.
Right.
Is there a reason for that?
Yes. There are several reasons for it. Well, I own it. I like it. I thought it might have been different if I had been able to, work with the Durista family and with other prints, and because we're looking for a dealer. I'm looking for one too. I thought it would be best to just have it pure. I mean, that honors more the idea. In some ways, what's more important than whatever price might be put on it is the aesthetic value that's placed on it. That's your judgment. That's why. Yeah.
You've gone through various stages where you were going to say different things, and if so, what was the fourth?
Oh, you mean like in the prints, or yeah? That's a great question. I was telling Corey, I was forced into printmaking. And an interesting thing about that, many things are interesting about printmaking. I like in etching and dry point, intaglio printmaking. The rich variety of textures and tones. It's more than I can get. I do draw a lot. I draw more than anything else. But for example, the flowers there. The flowers were done some time ago before either of the paintings on either side. Those paintings on either side were done post-pandemic. Durista had said to me one time, a still life, a good still life, should elicit all the dread of an effective funeral. And I got that. So that
Could you repeat the quote? Did you repeat that?
Oh, and sorry, still life, the still life tradition comes from Egypt, way back. So still life should, if it's going to be effective, it should elicit the dread of a good funeral. So, but the flowers from my yard, and I would just set them in front. I wanted to be able to get a sense of, with textures and tones, a sense of color without color. There are various things here that were objectives of mine in this. Well, there are prints of people who are homeless, and that was a challenge to go out and, I mean, I drew some around here when I'd be getting my car serviced. But I guess, Corey, I originally painted abstractly in my studio, and gradually I was weaned from that as I was realizing, oh, this isn't it. It's a challenge to draw, and then to train myself to be able to use my drawings effectively as a resource. There's a little head that's in a sort of it's a Venetian frame there. That is probably that I painted in the fall. A drawing I did for that many years ago. I did a lot of drawings of a woman. I was asked to paint her portrait. She was the mother of a student of mine. Paula Schofield was her name. She and her husband had fled Cuba when it changed politically. And they had been supporters of Castro. She went to school with Castro, but they became really disenchanted. So she was living at her daughter's home, and so I'd go to draw her. She taught piano to her grandchild and would give her daughter would play piano on Sunday afternoons, and I would paint and draw. And so I started a formal painting after doing a number of sketches. And then she had to halt the sittings. She was diagnosed with cancer. And she still wanted me to come and paint. We enjoyed each other's company. I'd make her coffee and we'd talk. And I still have the canvas. So I painted, or drew as I found her, smaller studies and sketches. And I did exhibit those. And it changed. There have been many experiences in my life, but this is one that changed my sense of in this case, what a formal portrait was. In this case, it became a collection of moments. And when I had hip surgery, I'm having hip surgery in a few days, thankfully. When I had hip surgery before, I was sort of confined, and so I went through. I have many boxes of drawings, and I found boxes of Alzheimer's heads that I'd forgotten I'd drawn, and when I could, I started working from them. I painted that, and it came quickly, and it was amazing to me how paint, you let paint conjure up the likeness, and how that cuts through time. Music can do that, smells, tastes, but sights can do that too. And so I'm glad I was able to put that in. That's enough, isn't it? You want to look at other things? And I can, mostly, and I didn't put titles, because, Dorista didn't like titles. It's figurative work. Sometimes, as he said, I can't tell what that is, but I think that I've had that painting years. I love that painting. It's missing from my kitchen. I think it is a can of olives. I've never seen a can of olives. Well, I haven't lived in Naples as he did. It's unfamiliar to me.
Lee, is there any one thing that he said to you when you were a young student artist that stuck with you throughout?
Oh, there are actually quite a few, Ed. I think, when he was printmaking, and we'd go for coffee every now and then. He was chair of the department. I mean, he taught, but he was also chair of the department from time to time. And he made me take action. And he did a lot of things on my behalf, like you don't have to take design, sculpture, or some other requirements. You're taking etching, etching, etching. And I realized, and I was saying to Corey, oh, I think they needed extra bodies in the class. No, I had the drawing skills that are necessary, absolutely necessary to do. And then as a foundation, but then I honed them. But he said, Rembrandt lost his reputation during his lifetime and all of his belongings. But what helped preserve his reputation were his etchings. And Drist was doing a lot of it. Because he was chair, he couldn't do a lot of paintings. And he had at home, he had a child with, they had 4 children, a child with disabilities. He had to be able to arrange a schedule to get home when she got off the bus. No, he said many things to me. He would say things like, talking about, he loved music, he loved literature. He was one time saying, Crime and Punishment is really kind of an absurd, it's an absurd idea that this guy kills his landlady with an axe. But on that event is based the whole idea of redemption. I mean, or another comparison, I guess it was related to Monty Python, Cosmic Tag. He felt that Moby Dick was really about cosmic tag. No, many things. Some of them just pop up every now and then. That's it. That's good. There's no refreshments or anything. Thank you.